Hello, good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this NOIR keynote lecture. And I'm really sorry I cannot be with you virtually in real time, but I hope that this recording would help to unravel some of the things that I wanted to discuss and present. This is also the first time I'm presenting this particular talk in this format, so it'll be really interesting for me to helpful for me to actually get some feedback. If anybody wants to write to me, I would be happy to receive the feedback. And I'm really excited to also be in this panel in really good company with Oliver and with Rob. And so I hope to catch up on the recordings later on and listen to the other lectures. So let me share my screen. So my talk today is distant times. This comes from an ESRC research project called Learning from Small Cities, and it's a very small part of it where we were looking at 3 cities. I'm going to talk particularly from the understanding that we gleaned from Shimla, a really small city up in the hills in the Himalayas, but it's a city that has been nominated to be one of the 100 smart cities in India. So on a warm summer evening, we were sitting with Shimla's smart city architect to understand how the smart city proposal came into being. The architect explained that he had been commissioned to design Shimla's master plan within 3 months in peak winter. First time in Shimla, he began eating at the local restaurants to familiarize himself with local residents. One evening after dinner, he came out of the restaurant and he looked up and he says, I looked up, there was one building and I saw one column dangling. I'm an architect. I really got scared. I said, we're here doing smart city. Things gonna fall apart. If one falls, no, it'll be just like domino effect and the whole city will go in one shot. I'm telling you even now, it's dangerous. That's it. That was the day we said, forget it. The only program that the smart city has to be focused on is this. The entire building stock must go. So he faced increasing resistance from his team, increasing opposition from his team, because people said, you must be crazy, you would want to demolish more than half of the city. But he then found support from the municipality. He says no architect would be interested in demolishing, but then there are things like bitter pills, when I can see that not doing this would create more harm thing for you. It's better to do that little surgical, whatever you call it, and start fixing the problem. Then luckily, when we talked to the official, we told them, figure out this now. Tell us whose land ownership, da, 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 da. So next, what they told us is the whole thing is government plan. Shimla's smart city proposals imagine a terra nullius. It's a clean slate in the land that belongs to the government, down the slopes of the hill, which is seen to be of no value at all. And the black circle is where the major part of the demolition is going to happen. Shimla is now designated as a future smart city, and the aim of the smart city proposal is to reduce its temporal and physical distance. And this distance is seen in the distance of connectivity between the top and the bottom of the hill, and also the distance of connectivity between Shimla and the plains through major road widening of the national highways. But the key intervention in the smart city proposal is, in Shimla's imagined future, is reducing the distance between the top and the bottom of the hill by installing escalators and lifts to reduce tourist time. And you see here on the left on this particular cross-section of the hill. There are also digitalizing projects, including the digitalization of land records and citywide GIS mapping for administrative purposes, as well as the installation of CCTV cameras. So the smart city proposal that came out at the end of this 3-month consultation and design designates this area, and it specifically mentions this area, saying presently the area selected has worthless dilapidated buildings with priceless views. And it further notes that this area which they have selected for the smart city redevelopment capitalizes on the opportunity to replace dilapidated and unsafe building stock with new, resilient, modern, earthquake-safe, smart green development, unlocking its full tourism potential. So the construction of land and terrain as empty space in order to initiate new infrastructure projects is nothing novel or original. We've seen that in much of the literature and scholarship on infrastructure. In 1864, after the British declared Shimla as its administrative capital, and very soon after set up its own municipality, each summer, the officers of the British Army and administration, their families, service staff, and supplies made the slow, laborious way up from Delhi in the plains through the only road that connected the Shimla to the plains. This was the Cart Road, and the Cart Road was a road that also connected Delhi, that is the kind of empire's administrative heartland, to Tibet and beyond to China. And even as the British built their summer capital at the top of the hill, they threw its debris down the slopes below Cart Road, which was an empty space shown in this archival map, and is the same space that is now taken for the Smart City project redevelopment. This is where urbanization was actually proceeding at a very rapid pace in the 19th and early 20th century. Houses, slaughterhouses, skin warehouses, religious buildings, coolie quarters, cattle sheds along the slopes were built with or even without approval from the newly established Shimla municipality. The area around Cart Road, and this is Cart Road that you see snaking up just above the black circle, this area around the Cart Road was settled by the lower castes, by migrant workers, laborers, sweepers, coolies, butchers, tailors, blacksmiths, shoemakers, who exchanged their labor for survival. And what they did was they serviced the imperial nerve center in the summer months. That was right at the top of the hill, which you see with these red buildings here. And they built their house, though, literally on the debris of the empire, the debris that was chucked down the side of the hill. These constituted the subaltern native subject of the British Empire, and they were what Walter Benjamin has called the homogeneous empty time of modernity associated with the quantification of the working day, the accumulative value of land and resources, as well as the calculation of exchange of labor. Yet their story of incremental urbanization from below Cart Road shows a refusal to conform to the homogeneous linearity of time imposed from above, even after 4 generations of house building. I start with this introduction because I will argue today that the seeds of aspirational urban futures are sown not just in the here and now, but also in the there and then, in the distant time of future pasts of Shimla's urban transformations. Distance has been a universal metric of capitalist growth, as well as an imperial system of asserting power. But distance here is a separation between a smart city speed, the incrementality of subaltern urbanization, and the cyclical time of ecological precarity along the hill slopes. The future here emerges in the case of Shimla through the entanglements between distance and its temporality that has now shaped its remodeling as a smart tourist destination, a future smart city in the Himalayas. There is a strong tradition in the anthropology of time around what many have observed as ignoring the future. Smart city imaginaries sidestep the diversity of past futures to construct a homogeneous modern time of progress, efficiency, and infrastructural development. The time of the smart urban future is an infrastructural time of speed that is linear and singular. Increasing control over distances means control over time. But Timothy Mitchell also argues that an infrastructure project is a device for stretching forward the passage of time. It is an apparatus for the creation of delay. The smart city proposal separates time and distance between those of more and less value, the views from the hills, the building stock, heritage, labor, and so on. It can only uphold speed at the top of the hill by introducing delayed and wasted time at the bottom. This is the distant time of the subaltern urbanization process. Distant time, therefore, to me, forms a lens to answer what Pels has asked as, quote, classic ethnographic questions about each image of the future that we encounter in their existence. What is it? When is it? Where and for whom does it work? Whose future is it? And whose does it exclude? The territorial time image of smart Shimla is built upon a terra nullius, an empty terrain on which constructions of heritage, risk, and assets are produced. But distant time filters questions of the future through long histories of land, through long histories of the types of changes in building technology, and as well as ecological precarity. Thus, I ask what happens when we juxtapose different time images of the future city from the top of the hill to the valley below. How do we understand Shimla's infrastructural time through the asynchronicities of distance? How do we settle on the question of what time is the future city? When is it to be found? Through the example of Shimla's future pass as one of the 100 smart cities within the current smart cities mission of India, I'll make two connected arguments today. First, that while distance has been the tool of colonization, segregation, and various degrees of incarceration, distances are also temporally accretive, and delayed time is a mechanism of maintaining physical and social distances. Second, I will argue that distant time unfolds through the temporal entanglements between the linear speed of technological progress, the cyclical time of ecological precarity, and the slow, delayed time of social justice. In doing so, what I want to argue is that multiple time images of the future emerge that enable us to challenge the singular linear time image of smart urban futures. To do this, I will think through what constitutes infrastructure, information infrastructures, in trying to understand how do we grasp these multiple time images. So after 3 months of repeated visits to the Shimla municipality, our team finally received permission to access the Shimla Municipal Corporation Records Room, which contains the records of building and construction since the municipality was established in 1864. The record room itself is a visual and olfactory overload, from the packed shelves with files falling off them, tattered files strewn all over the floor, files kept rolled up in cloth alongside the smell of damp, dust, and rodents. We were overwhelmed with the ruins of the information infrastructures of the empire in front of us. When we started reading these files, we did not really know what to expect. We soon realized that each file reveals a rich history of incremental house building below Cart Road, where the debris was thrown, with these intricate hand-drawn plans, elevations, and sections of building proposals, as well as detailed notes of communications between the subaltern subject and the state, the local municipality, but also across different municipal departments. So how are we able to make sense of these? What do they have to do with these distant times? I draw upon the work of anthropologist Susan Leigh Starr, in which she suggests that infrastructure is both a material artifact and a record of our time and activities. She urges us to, quote, bring in an ethnographic sensibility to the data collection and analysis, an idea that people make meanings based on their circumstances, and that these meanings would be inscribed into their judgments of the built information environment. I take this paradigm for understanding the vast number of files of house building applications from 1864 in Shimla as a form of information infrastructure that shows how the subaltern subject refuses to accept the limits of infrastructural time set by the municipality. These paper documents form what Boker et al. Argues as, quote, the whole array of organizational forms, practices, and institutions that accompany, make possible, and inflect the development of new technology, their related practices, and their distributions. Taken together, these files construct what Timothy Mitchell has noted as the infrastructure of delay. They enabled the municipality to delay and even suspend urbanization below Cart Road. More significantly, they enabled urbanization to remain in continuous abeyance to the distant time of the municipality, which operated at the top of the hill through their gazettes, their bylaws, and more significantly, the 1914 Shimla Improvement Trust report. In 1878, the population of Simla was 17,414, and in 1890, it had risen to 30,000. Shimla was undergoing rapid urbanization. These municipal files are a measure of the information networks of past futures, of new technologies of building and construction, new ways of stabilizing the hillside or protecting against monsoons and snow. They present us with the information infrastructure of the state through mechanisms, through these meticulous handwritten notes between different agents of the state, the secretary, the engineer, the assistant secretary, health officer, surveyor, each of them commenting, debating, and taking decisions on the temporalities of each house along the slope. Spot checks and surprise inspections were common since the early 19th centuries, as the municipality struggled to cope with continuous unauthorized building, often even as minor as the addition of a roof over a veranda. These files map the cyclical time of seasons and natural disasters addressed through repeated building activities and requests for approvals. Each file reveals a biography of ordinary house building, ordinary houses, ordinary lives, built against all odds, social, cultural, administrative, topographical, and ecological. The houses and the record of house building presents us with time as incremental, collected in bursts and spurts, going through cycles of suspension, delays, and destruction. Subaltern urbanization from below was then a persistence of bare life, directed to live within the wastes of the empire, along the slopes of very unstable rock, doing what Catherine McKittrick has called spatializing acts of survival. Smart cities, on the other hand, provide a different kind of information infrastructure of speed and acceleration that tends to bypass the temporal rhythms of subaltern house building. Approaching the smart city through the information infrastructures of future past tell us how Shimla municipality continues to keep the subaltern subject in delayed time through a familiar time image of order and surveillance in the face of rapid urbanization. Infrastructural time of subaltern house building was subservient to the visual consumption of aesthetic pleasures and health benefits for British officials, while the native subject had to conform to the clock time of a working day, standard even today at the beginning of the day at 10 a.m. and at the end of the day at 5 p.m. And you see this here represented very well in Taylor Buck's writing about Shimla in 1925, where he says, "To our brown friends, such things possess no attraction. The bustle, closeness, smells, flies, pariah dogs, and own children of the kennel, and all the attraction of the bazaar are to them more pleasing than the majestic tranquility of mountain and valley and far-off plains." Yet in Shimla, all clocks still have to listen to the sounds of the hills, the overflowing streams in the rains which can flood the roads, the silent mist settling into the valley which can reduce visibility in an instant and slow all traffic, the snow and the monsoons that make any construction or repair work very, very difficult outside of summer months. The depleting cuds, the rivulets and bowries, that is the springs, which supply water to a town that has expanded far beyond its projected 26,000 population as a summer capital of the Raj. This slow and cyclical time determined by the hills rather than the clocks also present a fundamental contradiction to Shimla's dreams of a smart urban future. Unlike the plains, the distances along the slopes construct a contoured time, either wrapped around the hill or along the slopes. They defy the linear narrative of speed and efficiency that require the maintenance of straight distances that is very common in the plains. In Shimla, even infrastructural time moves along the contours because any attempt at straight lines to supply water or sewage can lead to further delays and problems in engineering. So contoured time may seem to delay clock time, but it presents the most efficient mode of infrastructure in the hills. And more significantly, contoured time eases the slow labors of the subaltern subject cleaning or carrying goods to the tourist spectacle at the hill above. The contours, therefore, form the most basic infrastructural blueprint for a city in the hills. Today, below Cart Road that we see in the files in the Shimla Municipality Records Room has a name. It's called Krishnanagar. Krishnanagar is now part of a 48-acre smart city redevelopment. It has expanded far beyond its original footprint with fourth-generation descendants of the service workers of the Raj, as well as new waves of migrants coming from neighboring villages and further afar, even as far as from Kashmir. They're looking for livelihoods in a busy tourist town, but their work largely relies on providing service to the tourists in the town. Even before the Smart Cities mission came into being in 2013, a report by the regional government identified Krishnanagar as a pilot slum and initiated actions to prepare some slum-free city plans. They initiated a pilot slum resettlement project with proposed housing for about 300 units. And yet the total houses in Krishnanagar exceed over 1,200 units. So there is obviously a problem of supply of resettled housing stock as well. Shimla's smart city aspirations therefore disrupt the contoured time between the top and the bottom of the hill, between the tourist spaces of British nostalgia above and Krishnanagar below. Krishnanagar is left suspended in slow time through an attritional form of ecological disaster, as construction activity for the smart city projects above have increased along the upper slopes. Landslides have also increased and become much more frequent along the lower slopes, and the houses are literally opening up through cracks in the walls and ceilings every day in front of the households actually living inside these houses. Infrastructural time in Krishnanagar, therefore, has literally stood still for generations, even as the houses have not, and they continue to slide down the slope, down the hill. One of Shimla's elite residents said to me, Krishnanagar should be bombed out of the face of the hillside. For all purposes, Krishnanagar still exists in wasted time, in delayed time, deemed by the current municipality as a designated slum built on occupied land and filled with unauthorized extensions and encroachments. Krishnanagar exists only in its potential to be removed. Hence, the smart city proposal is able to legitimize and recommend its demolition alongside many other buildings just above Krishnanagar, just above Cart Road as well. Hence, the smart city proposal approaches Krishnanagar as a space that has existed in this kind of wasted time, wasted slope. Krishnanagar is now considered as the largest slum in Shimla district, yet the cyclical time of delays, decays, building and destruction of each house reveal that the taxonomies of illegality and informality are far more complicated, and that its denotation as a slum below Cart Road doesn't really hold simple understanding. Krishnanagar may still have poor or absent infrastructure, but the messiness of property rights and regularization certificates make clear that its temporality and constructions of illegality are entangled in very complicated way. Shimla of the future has now come to signify a flattening of speed in a town subservient to the slow contoured life of the hills. Most stakeholders in Shimla who we have been speaking to see smart as speedy improvements with 24/7 access to water, sanitation and transport in ways that is only possible in the in the plains. Municipal and smart city officers tell us that the scale and size of the change will modernize and build public infrastructure to make life more efficient, distances closer, and time much more productive. Policymakers also tell us that although they were initially against the smart city, they still want to bring essential services and urban transformations in Shimla through the Smart Cities program. Unlike other cities in the West, where smart is often synonymous with retrofitting information and communication technologies over existing infrastructure, Shimla's infrastructural time introduces what Timothy Mitchell calls an interruption, a gap out of which the present extracts wealth from the future. I would suggest that Shimla does much more than that. It extracts wealth from a selective version of its own past, as you see in these brochures, these images of Christchurch and the ridge at the top of the hill. The infrastructural time of the future for subaltern residents, however, is entangled with the information infrastructures of the colonial state. Krishnanagar's fate was sealed not just in its present moment, but 4 generations back when they settled along the lower slopes as migrants and service workers of the state. The municipal record room is bursting and a continuous challenge to maintain with very low staffing. Hence, there have been calls to destroy outdated files. The record room is a time image of subaltern future past. Many claim that files of their properties have gone missing from this municipal records room. The absence of a paper genealogy of house building produces a vulnerability of future existence. Often old plans go missing, especially in case of property disputes. In the absence of bona fide certificates for Hill State residency and paper documentation of ownership or land registrations, a time image of the past is perpetually transient. The future of Shimla has become the struggle for retaining its history, retaining its colonial information infrastructures, a tension between future aspirations and paper documentation for those who stand to lose most from the smart city futures. The distant time of the future city then, down the slopes, is a bare life, lived through multiple time images of survival, ecological, material, social, political. In doing so, distant time becomes a political apparatus of control and power, the maintenance of distance while keeping the subaltern in wasted time, while they also cope with cyclical and attritional time of ecological disasters like landslides and earthquakes. It brings to question the entanglements of people, ecology, and technology through a different rubric of inequality. They undermine the continued significance of infrastructural decay, delay, and destruction in challenging the ahistorical fantasies of smart futures and highlighting the fault lines of the information age that has so far turned its back to these long histories of colonialism, settlement, and its own information infrastructures. Subaltern time of infrastructure, I would argue, is therefore a time for land rights, a time for ecological stability, and a right to distant urban futures. Thank you very much. And I hope this lecture gives you an outline of the way I'm thinking in terms of subaltern urbanization, but also how time and distance are connected to each other. I would be very grateful if you wanted to send me any feedback, given that I'm not able to come to this talk in real time. Thank you very much.